Welcome to another episode here at the Masculine Health Solutions podcast. In today's episode, I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Dave, aka the Meditating Viking. This man has gone through a serious amount of crap in his life. This crap basically led to an extremely dark story. And he discusses how he went down some very, very dark paths early on in life. And how it led him to alcoholism. How it basically led to depression, anxiety, and a whole bunch of other mental health issues that stemmed from childhood trauma. He breaks it down, guys, and believe you me, it is sad at the beginning. However, Dave conquered all of these issues. He bettered himself through meditation, breath work, and basically discovering the essential self, which is something that he preaches on about today, because that's what helped him to basically overcome all these difficult issues that he was going through in his life. So guys, if you know anybody that's struggling with mental health or anybody that, could just use from an inspiring story, this is the one. This is it. It is a fantastic interview and I can't wait to share it with you guys. So without saying any more, let's jump on in. Welcome to another episode here at the Masculine Health Solutions podcast. Today, I got Dave, aka the Meditating Viking. And we're going to basically talk about how this man has helped many people with their mental health struggles and more than anything, men. And I feel that men really need to talk about this subject. We need to open up. Prior to us even talking here, we were talking about how there's certain steps that certain men need to take before we're able to actually, get into healing ourselves, right? And healing others, right? And Dave's used a lot of different methods that I'm actually all about. I'm on the same vibe about, and we're talking about meditating, breath work, basically getting our minds right. So without further ado, Dave, how is it going? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, brother. Well, I always think that the first place to start is always right at the beginning. My journey started when I was 5 years old. My father worked for the Ministry of Defence, so he was a military man. On his way to work, he was knocked from his push bike by a 24-ton lorry, broke his neck in 2 places and his back in 3 places, and was left as a tetraplegic in a wheelchair. He went to Stoke Mandeville for 3 years, which is like a specialist unit, and then for the last 2 years he came home. And then by the time, it was probably about 3 years actually, 3 years in Stoke Mandeville and another 3 years at home, and by the time I was around about 11, nearly 12, he passed away. About 6 months after that, my older brother, who was 3 years and 9 months older than me at the time, so he would have been 12, 13, 14, about 15, give or take, 14, 15, give or take, started to groom me, sexually abuse me, and then rape me between the ages of about 11, 12 to about 14, 15. I got into drink and drugs very, very early. Started smoking cannabis. One of my pals offered me this. It was like resin, and I was smoking pot all the way through school. But it was alcohol, which was the thing that was my go-to. And by the time I was 16, I was full-blown alcoholic. Now, there's different types of alcoholism, and mine was very much binge drinking. I didn't, as many children do in their adolescence and teenage years, they feel like nobody understands, nobody listens. And I didn't have anybody that I felt that I could turn to, because I had already been indoctrinated and brainwashed by my older brother that I'm the older brother, nobody's going to listen to you, you're just a piece of shit. And so I kept all of this bottled until I was 30 years old. I'll come back again. So I got into martial arts, and as a way of trying to find a way to protect myself and fight back. And that started not long after, and that was by chance. One of my pals in my tutor form group asked me to go with him because he felt like a lemon going by himself. 6 weeks later, he dropped out, and by the time I was 26, I was Kent County Jiu-Jitsu champion. within about, what was it, 4 years, 3 or 4 years, I'd gotten enough confidence to fight back, and I caught my brother with an absolute beauty of an uppercut. And from that day, he never laid another finger on me again. Rolling forward to 26, when I did my last competition, I busted my hand in the qualifier, and then won the championship with the same broken hand.
Oh.
So the qualifier was in the morning, and then the competition was in the afternoon. And because I'd gotten to a way of, at that point in life, I now understand what I was doing was I was disassociating by channeling my pain into my training. And any time that I got hurt, I would disassociate from myself, as I would do when I was being abused by my brother. So anytime I was actually getting physically attacked, I didn't actually feel a lot of the physical pain, because I was disassociating by removing myself essentially from my body. And people just go, man, you're fucking crazy. You're nuts, man. Well, how do you get hit so hard and not get knocked out and stuff? And I would just laugh at them, and I don't know, hit me harder. And they would hit me harder. And then understanding also as well that was me further punishing myself, because I thought that it was everything that had happened. I felt, as a lot of children do, they feel like it's their fault. So with the busted hand, by this time I was 26, I was a barber, a qualified hairdresser and a barber, and I had to have my hand reconstructed by a surgeon. And the surgeon said, like, Mr. Birchall, if you ever break your hand again, you can pretty much kiss your hairdressing and barbering career goodbye. So I needed to find another discipline for me to channel I was so angry, and all of my hate and my suffering and my pain. I needed to find somewhere to channel that. So I started going to the gym. Within 6 months, I mean, I was always one of the biggest kids in my year at school. I'm 6'2" now, and I level out about 17 stone, about 12 to 15% body fat, give or take. At the moment, I'm just maintaining. But I then found within 6 months of going to the gym, I was lifting all of the machines. I was lifting the whole stacks, and somebody said, dude, do you want to try training with free weights? So I started training with free weights. 12 months later, I'd got the bug. My whole physical body had changed. And with the martial arts and also being hench as well, I was like, wow, this is my suit of armor. And what I had created was this persona through masking. So I used to have the GI flat top, like Dolph Lundgren from the Rocky film. I will break you, you will lose. And people got the nickname the Terminator, because I looked like, and I always used to have these black sunglasses. I haven't got them handy. Always used to have these black sunglasses, and people would nickname me the Terminator because I had like this Terminator look, and because I was hench. Anyway, so I made 4 attempts in my life in 27 years, got sectioned twice. One of them was a compulsory, like where they take you in, I say like against your will, because I was a danger to myself, and I was cognitively unable to process my reality. So they said I was a danger to myself, or possibly a danger to anybody else, but I was more of a danger to myself because I was trying to kill myself. And then the last time I was sectioned, I actually put myself in, and that was only for a week. And they said, you don't want to be, you don't need to be here. You're not ill enough, was the crazy part. So I'd gotten to a point with the NHS that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I was just living on survival. And I picked up a book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And that just, so I looked that up, and then just by chance I came across somebody called Dr. Joe Dispenza, and that is where everything changed. And I'm getting chills now just thinking about it. And I saw it with Tom Bilyeu on Impact Theory. Yeah. And he tells, and Tom's an incredible man. He came from nothing, and he's created this empire. And he interviews scores of people from different backgrounds, of specialized areas and fields. And as soon as I found Impact Theory, I was hooked. And I just was like, there was this film many years ago that was called Short Circuit. There's a robot called Johnny Number 5, and he gets his book, and he's just like, blah, 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 input, blah, 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 input. And I was literally like this, just like, give me information. And what it was with Dr. Joe was he was on the 4x4. He was hit by a 4x4 on the biking portion of a triathlon, projected from his bike, and the impact as he hit the ground fractured 7 of his vertebrae. And in that time, he was told by, I think, 3 or 4 different specialist surgeons that if you don't have this Harrington rod surgery, you'll never walk again. So he was a chiropractor, and within the medical profession himself as well. So he had detailed understanding of anatomy and physiology. But he said to himself, well, the intelligence that makes the body can also heal the body. So he said to himself, well, I've got nothing else I can do here. I'm literally on this suspension bed, facing down, a bit like when Bruce Lee broke his back. If you remember the film,
No.
I can't think of his name. Jason Lee, I think it was, played Bruce Lee. And it showed the depiction of him lying in this suspension bed with his face down because he'd broken his back. And Joe said to himself, if I can heal myself through the power of thought, I would dedicate the rest of my life to the pursuit of understanding and then helping other people understand. Because he said, it's not about knowing how, it's about knowing how to. Well, within 9 weeks, he was back on his feet, and within 12 weeks, he was back training. And I was just like, wow, you know. So I started to read his books. I started to watch his seminars. I started to find out everything I could. And obviously, when you find certain channels on YouTube, the algorithm brings up other things that might be of similar interest. So then I found Dr. Bruce Lipton that started to talk about epigenetics. I found Tony Robbins and started to learn about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Bought 2 of Tony's books, which I've got in the bookcase here. So I think one of these, Awaken the Giant Within, and the other one's Ultimate Power. And I was just blown away, just because of how I was thinking and feeling. I was creating my reality. And because I was thinking and feeling in a mindset of suffering and of being a victim, because I was thinking and feeling and acting in that way, that was creating my personal reality. And also because of my understanding how Dr. Joe talks about everything in the quantum realm, if we look at everything in our understanding of material, even our bodies, these glasses, this hoodie is subatomic quantum particles. You look at everything down on a microscope, those particles are vibrating, and anything that vibrates carries frequency carries information.
Yeah.
So because I was harmonizing myself with suffering, then the universe was going, here you go, have some more suffering, have some more suffering. So I did what I call my external study. So I started to learn about epigenetics, neuroscience, neuro-linguistic programming, psychology, sociology, and anatomy and physiology even further, and the biomechanics, the hormones, and also my not just mine, but the human body's central nervous system, and started to put it all together. And then I started my meditation. And as I started to do my meditation, I was restless, I was irritable, I was discontent, and I couldn't get comfortable. And the reason was because I was still drinking. So I made a decision, right, I'm going to do this without anesthetizing myself. So as I removed that, I just went, bam, cold turkey, it stopped.
Yeah.
And by far, that was the fucking hardest thing I ever did in my life. But what I was finding was my body was biochemically dependent on how it was affecting my physiology, but also psychologically how I was feeling, because I was removing a cover from all of my hurt and my emotions. So as I started to do my meditation, I understand, and I was learning about what was happening with my brain. Anytime that I felt triggered, I was moving into high beta. And when I'm in high beta, or anybody's in high beta, which is 20 cycles to 40 cycles per second, that is the information that the brain is receiving is telling the body now that you're in a dangerous situation. So it tells the central nervous system, move over into the sympathetic. So the sympathetic is your fight, flight, or freeze, right? And what that does is that mobilizes your body to literally have a fight, run away, or freeze. But within that, that also down regulates your immune system, because your body doesn't want to be worrying about fighting an infection or bacterial infection at the time. It's worrying about the primordial response of getting you away from a fucking saber-toothed tiger that's going to eat you. Because if you get eaten, then you don't have to worry about fighting a virus. Or fighting a bacterial infection. So I was making myself sick by worrying and being fearful. So when I started to calm my brain down, now my central nervous system starts to calm down, and I start to bring my body back into homeostasis. And I started to understand that people live 70% of their lives in a stress state. And if we lose 10 billion cells every second, and those 10 billion cells aren't being replaced, just the lining of our intestinal tract replaces itself every 3 days. And then people want to know why they've got IBS, they've got acid reflux, they've got constipation or diarrhea.
All these different issues that kind of just stem from a mindset, but that mindset is almost just what keeps them captive for the rest of their lives. And it's kind of sad, but it's one thing that you're 100% right, where I mean, if you turn on the news, which is something that I don't watch anymore, it's basically just wanting to keeping us in that fear state, in that low vibrational frequency, you know, and I truly believe that. I really think it's almost disturbing, which is why I don't watch it. And I think that's probably why modern health is, is probably as bad as it is, man. But it's kind of like you're saying, it all stems from the mind. And one thing that kind of, one thing you said there was, you know, it's when you made that change, when you made that paradigm shift. But one thing I want to kind of ask you more about is, what were some of the methods that you employed to really make that paradigm shift? Like, what's something that made you more mindful? Like, what tools did you utilize when you realized you had to switch, that you had to change?
I'd gotten to a point, like I said, like just a few moments ago, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was constantly exhausted. I was constantly getting ill. I was constantly getting triggered by things that I shouldn't be getting triggered by. And I was, until I started to educate myself, I now understand I was in what we would understand as unconscious incompetence. I was like part of a zombie apocalypse, that I'm just wandering around. When you're in survival, your focus is singular and to a point. So you're not going to be worrying about anything around here. You're selfish, self-centered, irritable, all of the things that come from being within a survival state, perpetuated state. So I'm not, my attention is purely on myself all the time. So when myself and my wife got together, nobody else had ever been able to hold and create space for me. And she was patient enough to allow me to hold that space for me. And this is something that's really important when it comes to healing ourselves, is that the internal environment needs to feel safe by how we interpret our external environment. And because the information that I was receiving from my external environment was making me feel triggered and feel like I was constantly under attack, then my internal environment is going to feel triggered and under attack. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. It's almost, you gotta learn how to control that. Yeah.
So the environment of the relationship that I was in, the environment of the job that I was in, and the environment of my home relationship that I was in were all toxic. The last relationship I was in was the last partner I had, unbeknownst to me until I'd actually stepped out of it. She was a covert narcissist. But when you're literally like here, you can't see it. And you try and read something when it's here, and then you actually move it away, and then it moves into focus, and you go, wow, hold on a second. Now I understand why it was like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Your vantage point changed. That makes sense. And did you, is that when you started meditating as well? Or when did you discover meditation?
It was like I say, when I found out from Dr. Joe Dispenza, I saw that that clip on YouTube And I then showed it to my wife, Angela. And it was actually a conversation between, the second one that I saw was between Dr. Jodie Spencer and Ed Milet, who's like another life coach.
Okay, yeah.
Incredible guy. And he was another person that I was just listening to constantly. So the job that I was doing whilst I was listening to it was what's called a civil enforcement officer, which isn't fantastic or flashy or anything. It's just what the English over here call a traffic warden.
Yeah.
But my understanding was that there's obviously different types of learning. So like children sitting in a classroom is static learning, but when you're actually engaging all of your physiology, like moving, dancing or walking, then you're engaging both hemispheres of your brain, all four limbs. So you're becoming quadridic. So the frontal lobe and the hindbrain starts to communicate, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere starts to communicate. Now your learning jumps up to around about the 90% mark.
Yeah.
And I was listening to these podcasts, seminars and listening to audiobooks for 10 hours every single day. And I was doing 10-hour days. So every single day. And by the time I came home and I was like, babe, oh my God, I've had my mind blown today. And so I'd share that with her. So I'd get to watch it again. And then we'd have discussions and we'd start taking notes. We'd sit until like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes talking about it or going over it, pausing it, taking notes on it, and then having a discussion, you know, like you would do with in a lecture or something. So we're actually creating a record of information from the things that we're learning, but we're also sharing this together. And then we started to understand how so much of this ties together. When I first sat down to do a meditation, I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. I now spend up to 2 hours every single morning. I give myself 2 hours. So I'm up at sometimes 4 o'clock. Most mornings I'm up at 5 or 6. I give myself 2 hours, which is my time, until I don't always spend 2 hours, but I give myself 2 hours until I get that sweet spot where I can feel my body and my mind separating, where my body goes to sleep, but I'm still consciously aware.
Yeah.
Of my, I'm aware of my consciousness. Does that make sense?
100%. And what methodology do you use? Is there a specific type of meditation you do, transcendental or?
I was hoping you was going to ask that question. So, unbeknownst to me, so where I first started was with guided meditations because I really had no idea where to start. And I thought just listening to music, I'm you know, being a complete rookie, I was like, this isn't doing anything for me. So I'd listen to guided meditations, and I always found that a female voice seemed to be much more calming and soothing for me. With the guided meditation, that allowed me to keep my center of focus on the voice. Once I'd gotten to a point where I felt like the guided meditations had served their purpose, I then moved on to, I started to learn about breathwork. I started to work on, which I know is, I can't think of the damn expression, mindfulness meditation. Yes. So I was using diaphragmic breathing, very much like you would understand when Arnold Schwarzenegger and Frank Zane would do the vacuum pose.
Vacuum, yeah.
You know, trying to suck the belly button so it touches your spine.
Yes.
And learning about the Wim Hof method as well, to create like a hypoxic environment. So then you'd start to get tingling. And once I was creating that hypoxic environment within my body, that was creating physiological changes. And as I was getting this like bubbling sensation and the tingling, and the back of my neck was, it felt like doing drugs, but without doing drugs. And I think that's possibly something to do with, and I don't know how much there is to this, but possibly my brain secreting some DMT. Maybe, and I'm getting this euphoric, natural high from breathing it in a certain way. And as I did that, that's when I found that loads of my really, really troubling emotions started to bubble to the surface. And the things that I felt like I couldn't release or I felt were stuck. I don't know much about chakras, but I could physically feel parts of my body like balls or lumps or something actually physically moving through me and then being released as I was crying and as I was breathing it out. Not unlike the John Coffey from the Green Mile, where he takes in the illness with the white light, and then when he expels it, it's like these little black flies. So mindfulness meditation was one. Then I have also done like the loving meditation. I think is it a metta meditation?
I'm not sure. I've never done it myself.
So the metta meditation is about concentrating on yourself and sending loving information to yourself. That can be done with either affirmations, or as I personally call them, vocalization vibration. So anytime that we talk, as I learnt with NLP as well, how we actually speak has power within the words. When they say there's, there's a word that's a spelling, you're effectively casting a spell. Yes. But there's actually 5 different ways of saying no. So when somebody says no, or no, or no, it's the subtext of what somebody's saying. And also I learned about where you place sorry in a sentence also completely changes the context of where the power sits and the boundary sits within how you explain. So if I say, sorry, I can't do that, I've just said sorry before I've even explained what I'm going to describe. If I say, I can't do that, sorry, I'm now creating a boundary for myself, but I'm also honoring myself as well.
Yes.
So by saying, sorry, I can't do that, I'm giving my power away to that person that I'm speaking to unconsciously, because that's how I'm communicating to my unconscious mind and body.
100%. And that's kind of, that's the whole thing about meditation that we discussed before on your podcast, where it's kind of like when you're finally making that connect between the mind and the body. And it's kind of weird because you're like, whoa, where are these traumas kind of coming from? That's where I told you I was reading that book about the tapping solution, where it's the same deal. It's kind of like, releasing trauma that kind of gets stored in the body. It's almost like our body is a computer, right? And it's kind of mind-blowing the way that you said that, because I mean, I've never experienced that from meditation myself. Like, I'm not at that level yet. I'm still kind of dabbling, but with the tapping, I did kind of feel that, the more times that you do it, the more you kind of feel alleviated almost. And it's almost like you're releasing those bad vibes, that bad energy. And it's funny that you mentioned that as far as like your vibration goes. So one thing I was going to ask you, in contrast to like when you were, let's say, drinking to how you are now, what is the biggest physical difference that you felt now that you've kind of just finally let go of all that? And how do you feel mentally?
Night and day. It literally is like the alcohol. The only way I can describe it is because my thinking, my feeling, and my acting has changed. That creates my personality, and my personality creates my personal reality. So because the alcohol was attached to the old personality here, as I started to think, feel, and act differently, so did my belief system in myself, my confidence, my self-esteem, everything about how I used to think about myself, how I used to feel about myself, then started to change how I acted. If I change how I act, then that changes my habits, because they become repetitive procedures in our lives. And then our habits create our destiny. So as my how I thought and how I acted and how I felt about myself started to change, and my belief in my system and belief in myself started to change, then all of the alcoholism and the tendencies began to slip away. And as that started to slip away, and a new personality started to form, then I found myself creating a new identity, hence the Meditating Viking, to match and fit the new personality.
Yeah. That makes, I mean, it's almost like a rebirth, right?
Yeah, I reinvented myself. And the crazy thing was it wasn't really, I wasn't really aware of it happening until about a year ago, where it just suddenly went, where I started to, in lockdown in the UK, couldn't get to the barbers. So like I say, I used to have this like high and tight either like a flat top or like John Cena, and people used to like young kids think they look like John Cena because of the haircut, like a high and tight, like a military cut. And because I was growing my hair and I didn't know what to do with it, so I just thought, yeah, you know, I'll leave this bit here. And then I got my wife to shave the sides, and I started to grow the beard, and it just sort of evolved. And I was like, well, hold on a minute, I'm starting to look like a Viking.
Like
and
a
what
Viking.
do I spend my life talking about and teaching now and sharing with as many people to try and get them on board? Because, you know, 3 years ago, if you'd have said you'd been meditating 2 hours every morning, I would have fucking laughed in your face. Seriously.
Yeah, that's awesome though. But it's kind of like, it's funny in reinventing yourself. It's almost, that's where you find yourself, right? Because I'm also reading a book called The Gift of Giving. And it was interesting. One of the things that he said is like, you got to find or you lose yourself in giving of yourself. And that's almost like, well, where does this identity, like, where did I create this identity? Was I born with it? Or is this just the ego talking? And it's almost like when you merge yourself to the essential self is where you truly start to discover more about said self. And it's like, well, I'm not really this name that they gave me. I'm not really this personality they told me about. I can change a lot of things about myself, right? And it's funny because you mentioned that, and now you're at a state where it's like, nah, this is more in congruence with who I believe I truly am, right? How does that make you feel now versus how you were before?
I really don't recognize the person I was before. And I'm getting chills because underneath it all, I knew that there was this person that was waiting to break out and break free. I knew that this version of me was always there, like almost like tucked away in the shadows or locked up in a dark box in the back of my mind, in the back of my heart somewhere. And now I'm the person that I feel that I've always wanted to be and that has always been there. I cannot just, you know, like when people say that come to me and then they work with me and I'm either, normally it starts with me PTing them, and then I drip feed little bits of NLP with a bit of life coaching in, and I find more out about them because there's always an emotional pain which is attached to why they want to change the physical external of themselves through exercise, which was the same with me, which is a way of masking. So what I do is I get down and to understand what is the pain that's driving the emotion, that's driving the action, that's driving you to want to change yourself physically. Because when you actually get to a point of changing yourself physically, the emotions of why you don't feel the emotional need still isn't being met. And so it creates a distorted perception of yourself. Even though you look fantastic physically, internally, you still haven't you haven't implemented the changes, which is where the deepest hooks sit behind the emotional pain.
100%. What's the one thing that you think guys could start doing right now to kind of make that leap into really, I guess, getting through to their past traumas or really developing or really, you know, mending those wounds? What's the first thing they could do just to kind of get started, I guess, like a simple step that guys can do for their mental health?
I keep it real simple. Everybody that I coach and everybody that I teach, I say there's 3 keys. So the first key is acknowledging that there's something in your life that you're not happy with, or some aspect of yourself that you're not happy with. Once you can acknowledge it, then you can then start to work towards accepting that thing or element of yourself that you're not happy with. Once we get to accepting it, then we can move on to the final stage, which is by far the hardest. And I still have to work on this on a daily basis because this is a perishable skill, because otherwise my ego can still come in and go, no, you don't need to do that anymore, which is surrender. And one of the first things that I did, and I still use this tool now as an affirmation in my meditations, and I memorized it. Great divine universe, I now ask you for guidance, help, and strength. I hand over. So this is surrender. So I acknowledge that I need guidance, help, and strength because I can't do this on my own. So for me, the higher power, there's the intelligence. Some people see it as the universe. Some people see it as God. Some people see it as Allah. You know, everybody's interpretation of a higher power is down to them. My interpretation is the universe. The universe, I believe, has intelligence itself.
Gotcha.
Because of when people say they have a miracle, I call it a synchronicity. So something happens that cannot be by chance.
Yeah.
And you think, well, hold on a minute, how does that landed in my lap? How has that happened? Worked in my favor.
Yes.
So, you know, and some people might say that's a miracle. So I now hand over my worries, troubles, and fears for transmutation. Yeah. I see it, I feel it, I believe it, and I say it as if it is already done. So be it, it is done.
Gotcha.
Great divine universe. So I'll repeat it again. So great divine universe. I now ask for guidance, help, and strength. I hand over my worries, troubles, and fears for transmutation. I see it, I feel it, I believe it. So be it, it is done.
Gotcha. And that's like a morning affirmation that you do every morning, or okay?
Anytime that I feel like I've woken up and I'm like, you know, I've still got an emotional hangover from the day before, if that makes sense.
No, I got you. Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. I still react, but my refractory period of those emotions is dramatically shorter, you know, as opposed to it being a whole day or a whole week or a whole month. You know, what's wrong with him? I was in a mood. He's been like that all day. Oh, what's wrong with him? He's been like that for the last month. It must be like his temperament or something.
Yeah.
Oh, what's wrong with him? He's been like that for 3 years. It's like part of his personality. It becomes a personality trait.
5
so
years,
my refractory
10 years.
period.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah.
5 years, 10 years. Yeah, I know where you're going with that.
Yeah. So, you know, what happened to him? His wife divorced him 10 years ago, but he's still having the same emotional reaction 10 years later.
Yeah. And it's the same personality. You're right, because it's kind of like we discussed on your podcast too, where that carryover just goes on for way too long. It's like, bro, you got to let it go eventually. And if you don't, well, it's just gonna eat you alive, right? So
literally,
I 100% agree with you on that, man. But one thing I was gonna ask you, for coaching, what is it that you kind of specify in, and or what are when you're doing like life coaching and stuff and men's mental health? You know, where can these guys find you? Is it just strictly Instagram, or do you have a website? You know, how else do you do it?
Instagram at the moment, yeah.
Okay. And what do you work with these guys that you coach? Like, what does it look like, a session with you, Dave?
From right from the beginning. So I want to understand what their ultimate goal is, where they want to see themselves in a month, where they want to see themselves in 6 months. So it's a matter of staging. So where they want to see themselves in a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years.
Gotcha.
So that we've got a structure, and it's all about creating a blueprint and understanding what in their life isn't working at the moment, and then making incremental changes over a period of time until what used to be bad habits are now being replaced with tools that are tailored to that person, that help them implement the changes in a way that it doesn't make them feel like they're losing anything.
Gotcha.
And I'll even look at, like I said earlier, how somebody talks. So when somebody said, "Oh, I'm going to try and do deadlifts today," as we talked in my podcast last week, and this is so fresh and recent for me. I'm going to try and do deadlifts, and I was like, whoa, dude, just think about what you just said there. Were you going to try? Did you try and drive here? Did you try and brush your teeth this morning? Did you try and tie your shoelaces? Did you try and make your breakfast this morning? You're going to try and do deadlifts, are you? Or are you going to do deadlifts?
Yeah.
But also think of the subcontext as well about what you just said, the pitch, cadence, tempo, and volume of what you said. I think I'm going to try. So everything that you said is loaded with doubt and disbelief. So you're not going to even do anything. You're not going to do your PB today like you think you're going to do, because the way that you're talking to yourself is loaded with doubt and disbelief. So you're also communicating that to your unconscious mind and body.
Yeah, 100%. Subconscious.
So the next time I saw him, he was like, whoa, I'm doing deadlifts today, and I'm doing a 180 kilo deadlift. And I was like, bam, there you go. There's the belief in yourself. Just the way that you vocalize that, your vocalization vibration has completely changed. The subcontext of what you've articulated and communicated, not just to me, but to yourself as well. You now have complete faith belief and conviction that you're going to do it.
100%. Yeah, where it's just kind of like you come in with it with a half-ass attitude, you're going to have a half-ass result, right? So there's no way around that. And it all starts with how you talk, how you express. And it's funny too, because you see it at the gym, you see the same people that are just like, oh, I'm kind of here. And they don't have to say a word, but you can just tell by body language. You take a look at this guy, you're like, well, nothing to see here, folks. He's never going to progress past those 5 pounds. And
because the
brutal.
psychology is going to be matched by what was the expression I used earlier with my client? Your psychology is going to be matched by your bloody hell. Sorry, excuse me. Physiology. There we go. Brain went blank for a second. So your physiology is giving away your psychology.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of like, Jordan Peterson's book that we go back to again, Stand Up Straight. And I think a lot of that is 100% true. It's like, yo, if you stand up straight, you got better energy. If you walk confidently, you'll probably, there's probably gonna be more confidence in you to conquer the day or whatever the case may be. But if you're just like lackluster, just kind of going through the motions, well, that's going to carry over, and it's just going to be a personality trait that unfortunately you're going to be stuck with, right? And I think it all starts from the body. It all starts from within. So that being said, Dave, what do you for guys that are looking for the mental health aspect, what is it? What do your sessions? Do you still do personal training sessions with them? Is it a combination of both, or do you do some sessions that are just about mental health?
Yeah, some sessions that are just about mental health. So primarily, I'll try and get some. I'm going to have to interrupt myself. So I've just said it myself. So, and that even in itself is a clear indicator that we can still stumble over ourselves.
100%.
And falling back into unconscious incompetence. So it's a matter of being consciously aware of your incompetence.
Yeah. You and me both, brother.
So the biggest takeaway that I'll get for anyone is to get them to sit down and regulate their central nervous system through breath work. That's the first thing I do. Gotcha. Regulate your breath work. We're all gifted with the power of breath, but 98% of the world don't know how to use breath work properly or how to breathe properly. And when we're talking where we are now, we're probably only using 25 to 30% capacity of our lungs.
Probably, yeah.
So if you pop that up to 70 or 80%, maybe even 90% when you're training and you're hitting cardiovascular failure, you're now very much like in a car, you're getting to understand where your limits are, where your rev limit point is. Once you understand where your rev limit is, just exactly the same as with using visualization. So if you get somebody to stand and say, right, put your arms out and turn as far as you can. Yeah?
Yeah.
Now I want you to put your arms down by your side, close your eyes, right? And now do exactly the same exercise inside your mind. Put your arms out, visualize yourself putting your arms out and see how far you can go around, right? Once you've done that, come back to me, open your eyes. Now do that again. Every single time that person creates another 30% move and they're like, what just happened?
Yeah. That's the power of the mind at work. I gotcha.
So all of that is by creating a vision and mentally rehearsing in your mind, your brain cannot actually tell the difference between you performing the action and you imagining the action. And by imagining the action, by mentally rehearsing, performing a certain action or a task in your mind, when you actually come to do it, your output can be as much as 20 to 30% greater than you just going in cold.
100%. No, that's 100% true, because it's just like, I mean, I remember, I think it was Tony Robbins or somebody, where he was talking about how he was working with basketball players, and it's the same deal. He would get them to visualize them to get the free throw going in. However, I don't think it ever worked for Shaquille O'Neal. He still had a horrible shooting percentage. But for most of the other guys, they saw a boost, right? They saw a 10 to 20% boost in their, just from mentally rehearsing that shot, right? And just from doing that, it's like, hey, I went from an 80% shooter to like a 95, 94, which is damn near automatic. And at a professional level, you want to get whatever you can, whatever millimeter to make you better. And it's funny because it's kind of like sports psychology, I think, is starting to get more into visualization and mental rehearsing just because they realize the power of it. I think it's always kind of been around, but I think it's only been like at the top level. Maybe the elite athletes kind of knew about it. I remember the first person I read about it, now that you mentioned it, was Pelé, where they asked him, like, yo, man, you don't have time to train. How do you train? He's like, I'm training in my mind all day. And I was like, yo, take a step back. I'm like, you're the greatest soccer player who's not practicing like these other guys, and you're still ripping it up. Like, how does that make sense? But it's funny because mental rehearsing is one of those things and one of those underutilized tools. And it's cool to see that you're doing that with your clients. And it's something that I think more people should do on a daily basis just to get a better life. I think, combine that with
100%.
visualization. Like, what do you think?
What do I think? Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, I mean, the results speak for themselves. The feedback, like I said, when somebody comes back and they actually perform the task physically, and then they go, well, what just happened? How did I do that? And I say, that's you believing in yourself. And as soon as we start to strengthen our belief in ourselves, then our confidence starts to grow. And with that, then becomes the passion behind wanting more and more and more to improve and grow and evolve even further.
Gotcha. Yeah. I
And to
mean,
use these tools for everyone, I honestly think that would be the implementing change of probably how the human race would ultimately shift and evolve.
I was thinking about that in my mind. It seems like you read it, but yeah, I was like, what do you think we could do as a whole? But
I've said many, many times, imagine the world if we actually work together. 7.9 billion people work together collectively, as opposed to us actually working in separation and competition.
100%. And it's kind of like that scarcity mindset, that divide and conquer that we kind of see everywhere, where everybody's polarized about everything. And it's funny because I'm like, hey, man, if we just made that paradigm shift, we all got in the same vibration, who knows what we are capable of? As woo-woo as that might sound, I think it's something that kind of merits a little bit of exploration, because I think it'd be cool if we all just kind of finally work together instead of fighting each other all the time. So that's a great way for us to close off this session, man. But I just let us know where we can find you, Dave. How guys can get in touch with you and all the services you offer. Give us the lowdown.
The simplest thing to do is just hit me up on Instagram. The page is called Free Your Mind. You can also connect with my wife as well, Angela the Angel. She's a co-creator for Free Your Mind. So it's literally just Free Your Mind 77, or type in the Meditating Viking. Hence how I recreated or reinvented myself. DM me, and obviously if I'm not in the gym, if I'm not with a client, if I'm not eating, or if I'm not sleeping, I'll do my best to get straight back to you. And it's just as simple as that. I've moved massively away from Facebook because I find that it's so is real toxic, and there's just nothing in there that that resonates with me anymore. But there just seems to be, I don't know what it is about Instagram, it just seems to be the platform where everybody seems to be able to connect properly. Yeah. Some of my services are charged for, some of my services don't. Sometimes when somebody just needs somebody to talk to or to listen to, or to have a few tools at their disposal which they don't know where to get started, I will happily impart knowledge and information as much as I can wherever I can, and I don't charge for it. Gotcha. If you wanted to get into the real nitty-gritty of me helping you work together collectively by drawing up a blueprint, what I call in my work is a blueprint. So designing a blueprint of what you want your life to be, as opposed to where you are now. So that will be everything. So where you work, what your relationship is, what you're eating, what you're watching, what you're reading, how you're training, everything. So I look at it very much like the Matrix, as everything is as energy. Like when Neo comes in and scares Cypher, and he goes, whoa, scared the bejesus out of him. And he says, do you even see the code? I said, no, all I see is blonde, brunette, redhead. And I see everything in this world as energy. So what I read is energy. What I see on the TV is energy. Like yourself, I don't watch the news or anything like that. I like my films, I like my documentaries. Anything that's going to feed me and nourish me, I will watch. But if it doesn't, it's not going on. And it's just a matter of upgrading yourself and continuing to upgrade yourself. And I will continue to do this until this avatar, this meat sack, stops working. And then obviously, hopefully, and I know there's an afterlife because we've returned to the quantum field. I will continue my work when I return to source. But all the time that this meat sack is working, I will continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to help anybody else and everyone else that I possibly can try and touch and reach.
100%. Hey, mad respect for that. With that, on that note, Dave, it was a pleasure having you here, and I can't wait for the next episode, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you again, man.
All right. On that note, guys, have a safe day. Dave, thanks again. Until the next one.